Welcome back to the Power of Coffee. This is the next 10 pages to make the 70th page of the story. Let's continue. Okay, so now Pastor Nemo, who is standing in as the lawyer for Alfred, the one who accused Betty's coffee shop of selling contaminated products. The pastor has now reached an agreement with the Madeleine Boyson, the lawyer. They finally agreed that Alfred Cujo, the one who accused them of selling contaminated products, actually made a mistake. So that's where we are now. The pastor glanced at her and then she glanced back. That is, between Pastor Nemo and Lamley. Then Madeleine continued. Pastor Nemo, first of all, your client must make a full confession to the FDA. We need to hear it on tape that he falsely accused my client, Madam Betty O'Kine, of serving contaminated food to the patrons of her coffee shop. Then we can discuss compensation. You have until tomorrow, Mr. Cujo, to comply with this directive, else we will have to go to court. Those were her final words. The pastor joined heads with Alfred once more, and then moments later he announced that his client was ready to comply. The trip to the FDA came on that day, and everything was put on tape. But it wasn't so simple. Mr. Johnny was present with a team of 3 men, all of whom were in suits. Mr. Johnny is the one who had welcomed them when they went to the FDA to complain that their coffee shop had been shut down. He is Mr. Johnny. Okay, the trip to the FDA came on that day and everything was put on tape. But it wasn't so simple. Mr. Johnny was present with a team of 3 men, all of whom were in suits. They looked as serious as he did. Listening attentively as Alfred slowly narrated his side of the story. Alfred is the one who made a complaint for the coffee shop to be shut down. They looked as serious as he did, listening attentively as Alfred slowly narrated his side of the story, admitting to having lied because of his earlier treatment, being refused service at a time when the coffee shop wasn't open. Pastor Nemo sat quietly beside him, but he was no longer in his glasses. When he had finished confessing, one of the men in suit let out a soft chuckle, and then, looking at him, he said, Mr. Cujo, do you realize what you've done? I mean, do you know how much trouble you are in? His response was a nod, several nods. He seemed a little shaky, and his head had been in a bow since he came in. All right. I would like to apologize to Madam Betty O'Kine for the wrong judgment. Mr. Johnny had begun, but wasn't allowed to finish. The man who had spoken to Alfred cut in, sounding irritated. Mr. Johnny, how long have you been at your post? About 15 years. He softly replied. 15 years. And this is how you treat the businesses. You just shut down anyone you suspect without going through the right channels. Is that what you've been doing all these 15 years? The man blurted, and when Mr. Johnny didn't respond, he got up and then looked down at him and remarked in a calm way, you're fired. But you already know that, don't you? To end the story, the FDA offered some compensation, money, and an approval stamp for the baked product that Betty sold at the coffee house. In addition to this, Alfred paid the fine for his lies. But it was his lawyer, the pastor, who had footed a bill of $700, although it was $300 short of the original fee. Betty returned home, while Lumley had lunch with Madeline to celebrate. 2 days later, the coffee house opened its doors, but not to customers. It was time for a revamp. The walls were painted anew, the tiled floor was scrapped, old chairs and tables were replaced. Martha and her older sisters, that's Betty's friends, were part of the cleaning team, and when it was over, Betty gave everyone a share of the compensation fee from the FDA. It was $30 for Martha and the same for Anne, Belinda, and Selassie. After a week, the coffee house was open, and for the first time, the customers paid nothing. Martha made some suggestions to Betty. Martha made some suggestions to Betty about introducing music to the house. She said it could be a platform for discovering musicians among the patrons of the coffee house. Betty liked the idea, and so did her daughter, Lumley. Outside the coffee house, they put out a large poster announcing the introduction of musical performances on Friday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Those who wanted to partake had to register their interest by Thursday. There was no age limit for the performers, but the only music they could sing was gospel. And there was a dress code: long skirts for women and trousers for men. For a period of 3 hours, there were 50 interested folks, all of varying ages, the youngest being 12 years old and the oldest 45. Martha had taken down their names, age, and location of residence. The majority of them lived nearby, but there were those who had come from the moon, far beyond the reach of the poster. When Martha asked one of them how he got to know about the show, the 17-year-old boy claimed he had heard it from someone who lived in his neighborhood. Martha got curious, wondering if that someone had come all the way just to take tea. She asked the boy who it was, and if the person was a regular patron of the coffee house. He shrugged and replied that he only knows him as a laborer. That explained it. They were migrant workers. Lumley set the stage for the Friday show, bringing in some musical instruments, 3 microphones, a few tambourines, and a guitar, all rented. An hour before the show began, some of the chairs and tables were moved away to create space for the performers. The room was large enough to fit in about 70 people and to avoid congestion. The room was large enough to fit in about 70 people, and to avoid congestion, Betty hired someone to stand guard at the door. He was a 25-year-old man, tall, muscular, and of light complexion. He worked as a handyman and was popular in the neighborhood, admired for his looks and praised for his skills in plumbing and painting. Betty met him upon a neighbor's recommendation when she needed someone to fix her kitchen tap, which was leaking at the sink. At the time, he was 22. He came by dressed in his work clothes, an old shirt and trousers, and when Betty saw him, she immediately smiled. This was a fine young man, too refined to be working on such a job. She pondered over his educational background and thought of asking him a few personal questions after he had finished the work. It was over in less than an hour, with no more leakage. Betty was impressed by his speed and thorough knowledge of the job, since the puncture was a big one. She asked him where he had learned the skill. From school. I went to a technical school. He simply said, speaking in vernacular. Oh, okay, she replied, a little taken aback. So, how much is my charge? She said, after some moment. Oh, just give me what you see fit, he replied, with a gentle smile. She chuckled and then remarked, what if I have nothing to give? He responded with a smile. Betty went away for the money while he waited outside, sitting on the steps leading to the front door. Sitting on the stairs leading to the front door. She returned after 10 minutes, holding a large black polythene sack, which appeared full. He got up and faced her, and then glanced at the bag in her hand. Madame, are you going somewhere? I could carry it for you, he said, and then she shook her head. No, I'm not. This is for you. Just a few items to prepare some food with, she said, and gave him the bag. He smiled and slowly accepted it. That was the start of their friendship. The next day, he was back, coming to thank her for her gift. Then he offered to do the lawn, clearing it up with a machete. Subsequently, he left, but often came by to help with any available work. He did the laundry once, and after that, Betty hired him to do it every weekend. She offered him $5 for every washing Saturday, in addition to lunch. However, 2 months later, he got a contract with a certain company and subsequently had to leave town. Betty got a replacement in a 25-year-old woman who lived in the neighborhood and was a fellow of her church. She was hard-working, except she didn't do the lawn. When she also left town for greener pastures, Martha stepped in, out of the blue. Now, 3 years later, Kwame, the young, handsome, skilled man, was back and standing guard at her coffee shop. By 3 p.m., the house was full. The performers were divided into 3 groups, 20 people in the first group and 15 people in the second and third group. But with only 3 hours of playtime, not everyone could sing that evening. The first group was on that night. Obviously, and each person had only 10 minutes to showcase his act. A 30-year-old woman, Yaya, was the first to perform. Okay, so now we're talking about the musical show that Martha suggested to Betty, okay? That they set up a musical show so the coffee house becomes more lively and it gets more patronage to increase sales. So now we're on the musical show, and we have the first performer, who is a 30-year-old woman called Yaya. She was tall and dark and a little plump. Her face was round and her head was plaited. She spoke in vernacular, introducing herself as a petty trader. Then she named her song. It was a popular tune, but Yaya changed it that night, making it sound like nothing we had before. Her voice was calm, when it had to be, and full of life as the song rose. Martha, Betty, Lumley, and the others were seated in the front row, and none of them looked distracted, except by her presence. 5 minutes through the song, the house erupted with loud applause. It felt like being in a concert hall. Yaya was a total showgirl. She came into the audience, shaking hands and doing some sing-alongs. Several phones were up, taking down the moment. 15 minutes went by before the show ended. The stage was full of ecstatic fans, most of whom were youngsters. The girls hugged her while the boys cried her name, cheering her on. Lumley got onto the stage to control them, speaking into the microphone and asking them to leave for the next performance. Slowly they obeyed, and then came a girl, younger than Yaya. Her name was Doreen, and she was a seamstress, 21 years of age. She was about the same height, light in complexion, thin. She was about the same height, light in complexion, slim and in a headgear. She also spoke in vernacular, in the same dialect that Yaya had used, Chi. Doreen began to softly clear her throat, and then she did some testing on the microphone, and after a minute she started to sing. Her voice was a little thin, but she carried it well, following the tune, and filling up the room with the sound of her heart. Betty followed her on the stage, staring with a kind of satisfaction. She smiled and continuously nodded. She smiled and continuously nodded, quietly singing along. At the end of her performance, Betty was the first to clap, standing up to show her support. Doreen was flanked by the same fans who came around Yaya, but Lumley didn't let them stay for long. The night continued with a mix of melody and comedy. There were voices unimaginable, a few divine. By 7 p.m., nearly all 20 people in the first group had sung, and for the 3 who could not, Betty asked them to wait for Friday, and then she addressed the audience, thanking them for showing up for the show and for the performance. She praised their act and courage and predicted that the media would soon find them. So by 7 p.m., nearly all 20 people in the first group had sung, and for the 3 who could not, Betty asked them to wait for Friday, and then she addressed the audience, thanking them for showing up for the show, and for the performers, she praised their act and courage and predicted that the media would soon find them. A few of the patrons helped clear up the place before leaving for home. So this marks the end of the musical session for that Friday at the coffee house. Okay, Martha escorted Betty to her place, while Lumley and the rest of the women, being Anne, Belinda, and Selassie, stayed to finish up before leaving. Yet there wasn't much to do except the dishes. Lumley spoke of the joy she felt that evening, chatting with them in Cree. Belinda disclosed her desire to partake in the show the next Friday, and then began to prove her point by launching a tune. She carried it well, and Lumley applauded. Then Anne and Selassie took turns in showing off their vocals. They all sounded like mature singers, which was no wonder, since they were part of the choral troupe at church. Then Lumley began to sing, but she didn't know all the words to the song. So she stopped and then began another one in English. She sounded like a celebrated singer, leaving the others to steal glances at each other. 5 minutes later, she ended it with a bow, and the women were all over her. The Friday musical show at the coffee house was everywhere now. The videos were online, and just as Betty predicted, the media came in. Bloggers and journalists, and a few celebrities, all raving about some of the big voices like Yaya and Doreen. When Lamley saw this, she saw an opportunity and told her mother about it. The coffee house could become a concert hall. The best performers could earn something by showcasing their art, and fresh bread, cake, tea, and coffee could also make something for itself. Okay. When I first came to the coffee house, I did the dishes. Then I got promoted to wait tables. And now I'm the assistant manager. So, Martha is talking now, and it seems some time has passed since she joined the coffee house. Now she's the assistant manager. When I first came to the coffee house, I did the dishes. Then I got promoted to wait tables. And now I'm the assistant manager. Betty gave me the post and made Belinda my boss. Anne and Selassie still hang around when they can. But they no longer work here. With the introduction of the Friday musical show, the coffee house has seen high patronage, and the media men, the journalists, the bloggers have never missed a show ever since Yaya and Doreen became regular performers. We now charge a gate fee for our special Fridays, and Betty already has a management team in place for the top performers. Lamley spent a good time with us, about 2 weeks, before returning to her job in Canada. Betty is home now, enjoying her retirement. Once in a while, she comes in to check on us. Me, Belinda, and the new employees, who consist of a team of 10 waiters and waitresses, 3 cleaners, and a chef who specializes in preparing coffee and tea. Belinda is quite happy these days, since her 13-year-old daughter, Miriam, lives with her. She used to be by her father and grandmother in the village, until she went for her. You know, in the previous pages we talk about Belinda having a daughter who lives with her husband in the village. So that's the girl we talked about, Miriam. Belinda's quite happy these days since her 13-year-old daughter, Miriam, lives with her. She used to be by her father and grandmother in the village, until she went for her. But it wasn't so easy. She first had to go through her mother-in-law, who didn't believe that she could cater for her daughter. Though Belinda told her about her job at the coffee house and about the large grocery store she runs at home, Nana, her in-law, did not approve of Miriam living with her, until Belinda gave her some hard evidence, money to the tune of $40. Okay, so Belinda was able to go to the village to get her daughter to live with her in the city. But first she had to convince her mother-in-law. Okay, so let's take that line again. Belinda's quite happy now. She's quite happy these days since her 13-year-old daughter, Miriam, lives with her. She used to be by her father and grandmother in the village until she went for her. But it wasn't so easy. She first had to go through her mother-in-law, who didn't believe that she could cater for her daughter. Though Belinda told her about her job at the coffee house and about the large grocery store she runs at home, Nana, her in-law, did not approve of Miriam living with her, until Belinda gave her some hard evidence, money to the tune of $40. She dropped the bunch of cash on her bed one evening, while she sat on it reading the Bible. She asked what it was, and then she turned and found it. Then she picked it up after putting down the Bible, and then looking at Belinda, asked who it was for, or whom it was for. I want my daughter to live with me. I can take care of her. As you can see, I have the money. That was her response. Immediately, Nana smiled and walked away. Immediately, Nana smiled and walked up to Belinda and held her hand, and then said in Cree, "My daughter, forgive me for keeping you away from your husband and your child. Now that I know that you have enough money to live on, take your daughter with you, so that my son can save up for the future." Belinda smiled, amused by her words, and then left her alone. Miriam came to the coffee house when she was free at home, and sometimes after school. She was tall and slender and had plaited hair, always cheerful and willing to partake in any activity at the coffee house, be it helping with the cleaning of the place or joining the performers on stage. Indeed, she became a performer too, after appearing on stage during one special Friday. She wooed the audience with an energetic tune, coupled with some dance moves, and after the show, one female blogger got her talking about her dreams to become a celebrity singer. 2 days later, a man walked into the coffee house asking about her. He was a well-known preacher and a gospel singer. Okay, so we're talking about Miriam now, who is Belinda's daughter, whom she was able to get from the village to live with her in the city. Miriam is now joining the performers on stage for the special Friday, for the musical show on the Fridays. And after she got on stage she got on stage to perform, she was really good at her act that a female blogger began to interview her. Okay, then 2 days later, a popular musician contacted her. Okay, 2 days later, a man walked into the coffee house asking about her. That's Miriam. He was a well-known preacher and a gospel singer. Belinda met with him and introduced herself as the girl's mother, adding that her daughter could not quit school to sing. The man agreed, saying that he only came to meet her and assure her of a place with his record label once she completes school. Subsequently, he left, failing to speak with her as she was in school. However, he finally did, and though she wasn't happy about his decision to wait until she finished school, she was in high spirit. Selassie was now independent in the financial sense. Like Belinda, she also ran a big store at home, selling everything from groceries to hair creams, along with second-hand clothing. Her teenage daughter and son were still in boarding school, nearing completion. Her last child, a boy named Sefa, recently won a scholarship to cover the rest of his junior high school education. Belinda told me this. So we are now speaking in Martha's voice. Belinda told me this, in addition to something interesting. There was a new star performer at the coffee house. His name was Komla, and he was Selassie's estranged husband. He made his debut on the Friday musical show, singing alongside a young woman whom he introduced as his sister in Christ. Okay, so there is a new singer on the Friday musical show, and he happens to be Selassie's estranged husband. The husband who left her because he didn't want to pay for the debt the loan she had taken to re-establish her shop at the marketplace after the second fire. after the second fire. The man who had abandoned her after she attempted suicide. That man, Selassie's estranged husband, was now working as a singer during the Friday musical show. He was performing as a singer at the coffee house during the musical show. And his name is Komla. Belinda informed her about Komla. Okay, so let's start it again. There was a new star performer at the coffee house. His name was Komla, and he was Selassie's estranged husband. He made his debut on the Friday musical show, singing alongside a young woman whom he introduced as his sister in Christ. Selassie was absent by then, as she no longer worked at the coffee house. Belinda informed her about Komla when he became a regular performer, and then she met him one Friday after the show. She called out to him, and when he saw her, he gaily smiled and asked what she was doing there, sounding as though nothing was wrong. Selassie told him that she was part owner of the coffee house, and for that reason he wasn't welcome there. Okay, so this marks the end of the 70th page of the story, The Power of Coffee. Join me for the next 10 pages to make the 80th page of the story.